we have another audience question. So, from our wonderful audience, would you please, crew, zoom in very close on the person? There you go. There we go. Would you please give us your name and your question?
Hi there. My name is Tina, and I have a two-part question for you guys. The first part is, in your time and experience discussing atheism and debating, what would you say is the dumbest argument you've had to discuss? And then the second part is, what's your favorite or best argument that you've heard?
The 7 day. The 7 day cycle.
Fuck my life.
Yeah.
Fuck my life.
He goes by many names. Mr. Delicious and Sir Le Chef, I'm sure he's watching, and of all of the arguments for God, that is the one that it's the combination of it being complete nonsense and him having such utter confidence in it and it alone blows my fucking mind. And that's why I hesitate. I mean, if another host wants to take the call, I'm happy to let it go. There isn't really anything else I can say to it because I thought I gave good counters to it. And he just goes, no, you're panicking. Blah, 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 blah. So that's the stupidest argument. How about yourself?
Honestly, I think the dumbest fucking arguments are the triomny arguments. I hate those because if you read, this is my nerd coming out. If you read Hobbes' Refutations of Descartes' Meditations, he just slaughters it. And then he goes on to discuss, maybe this is even divulging, I more or less view myself as an atheist because remove myself from all the cultural and Caucasian, remove myself from the heuristic, remove myself from hearing all this stuff. If I were to stumble across these conversations without prior knowledge, they would be completely incoherent to me. And I think all of us could be honest in saying that this isn't, because there is no referent. So he talks about that in Leviathan. He talks about also worshiping monarchy in Leviathan. So we can get rid of Hobbes being a maniac in that, but he really did a good job talking about how the absurdity of Descartes' arguments and how it's wholly subjective. And whenever you mention the word angel to one person, it reads as one thing to one person, but another person. But then he talks about the omnis, and then Spinoza even goes deeper in it. So when you look at somebody, let's say, we call the God omnibenevolent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Well, if you're omniscient and you know everything, then you can't be omnibenevolent. And if you already know everything, then there's no way you can even exercise free will or even will in general, because it's already known, it's already done, it's already set out. So more or less, you're just like a train on a track that's doing what's already been planned out to do. And if it's already known and already done and you can't go against it, and I'm sure you can play all these little twist and turn games, but when you get down to it, down to brass tacks, the God that is proposed by those who promote like an omni or even a maximal to try to weasel in that whole fucking thing. Yeah. The God cannot have even will at that point. It's like a rock pushed down a hill. It does what it does because that's what it does, not under its own volition, and then what is benevolent, so the triomnies to me are one of the deadest, most incompatible things. And in my mind, debunks that God and shows it to be impossible. So I really, and it's also incoherent. So I really can't even, it's like somebody coming up to me at work and being like, hey, Jason, I just welded this weld with peanut butter and then we normalized it using marshmallows and then I picked it up and threw it across the yard. I would just, at that point, I'm like, that thing's a rocket, what? I wouldn't even consider it. Like, it wouldn't even be allowed to be brought to the table for consideration due to the total absurdity of it. Yeah. So
when you're smashing into things like the problem of evil and the problem of divine hiddenness, and there's just like, come on, God.
Yeah.
Hello.
Well, especially with the attributes given to that God, that the fact that it wants to know you and it wants to do these things, but it already knew that you were not gonna. It's so incoherent and so fucking absurd that I have to say, to answer your question, any argument for the existence of the Christian God to me is the worst argument because it's just fucking stupid.
As presented in the triomny.
As presented in the triomny, blah, blah, blah thing, So, and as far as the best, I'm going to shoot it back to you.
Well, two. In terms of the least assailable, means what best? The least assailable is deism, where by definition, the God cannot be detected, cannot be communicated with, has no impact on the universe, exists, but we can't possibly reach it. And I'm like, cool. I can't say anything against it, but it's a useless assertion. Like, why even bother with a God at this point? And the most compelling, I mean, I guess, might be the Kalam. I have problems with it. You have to accept certain arguments for it to work. And even if I grant them things, the closest you get is to a first cause or a first mover. And I won't let them go any further than that. Like the leap that William Elaine Craig's make to, and therefore the Christian God. I'm like, hold your horses there, Chief. Slow your roll. You've made a leap truly Olympic in size on that one. But that's, I mean, because I have the most trouble directly refuting some of the arguments of the Kalam, I will grant them a first mover, mainly because I don't know what happened before the Planck time. No one does. And if that's what you want to think about what happened then fine, go nuts.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny, the deism one I put actually as one of the least compelling for me, only because you literally have no reason to think it. And you admit that there is no interaction, so why the fuck do you even think? Like, again, that's just the whole incoherency thing. Now, what's interesting for me, you might disagree with this. There's really nothing compelling for me, but the thing that I really can't argue with is personal experience, and I can't argue with that because if somebody has a personal experience and they have whatever experience they have, I literally can't be in that moment with them. I can't investigate their mind. I mean, we could do skin sensitivity tests, lie detector stuff, blah, blah, blah. We can check their reactions. But if somebody believes, that's, at that point, we're just measuring belief. And if somebody truly believes that they had that experience, what else can I do?
I'm absolutely on board. We have to take people at their word that when they say they had an experience, they had the experience. What they attribute it to, we may disagree with.
Yeah, there may be an attribution error in the field, as we call an attribution error. And I might try to kind of dig it out and see why would you attribute it to this. A lot of times it has to do with how you were raised. Grief a lot of times is a big thing. You're trying to cope. You're in a place of stress, but also at the same time, I don't want to downgrade somebody's personal experience and say, well, it's because you're having mental health problems. That's like saying religious belief is delusional. I have a hard fucking time with that.
Yeah, I would never say that religion is a mental illness.
Exactly, or is related to being mentally ill, or is related to being sick, or even in grief. So, I mean, I know plenty of people I've talked to that have had personal experiences while they're laying in bed or watching TV or just doing their normal shit that everybody does, in the toilet or something,
Which is why also as a corollary, it absolutely rustles my jimmies, to say as they say on the internet. When a apologist comes in and says, you're not really an atheist, you really believe you're just lying to yourself. I'm like, shut up, I know what's in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's how I feel about religious folks. I was arguing again with Helen, Hell's Bells, and I were arguing with some people. Actually, I love arguing with atheists because a lot of atheists, I feel, do a lot of argument from authority shit, especially maybe some newer atheists. They like to say, well, so-and-so science this, so-and-so science that. And as somebody with multiple science degrees who've worked in multiple scientific fields, the whole thing, that really irks me because there was somebody with the discussion thing that we were doing talking about how religious belief is delusional. And I'm like, how? How is it? It's a culturally acceptable belief. Now, what would be delusional is if they deviated from that culturally acceptable belief and started doing things that weren't just normalized around the millions of people that they're around. That's when you start where you get things like cults and things, because it's a little deviation. You have the figurehead, and it's not a normal thing to go on in that culture. But something that's been driven into your head for, say the first 14 years of your life, whenever you're just now developing your own sense of self and understanding and consciousness and self-awareness, you had no fucking control over that. So your neurons are connected and it goes do-do-do-do, and it's like, okay, God, emotional reaction. That's okay. I don't see that as delusional. That's just life. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
You see that with political leanings. You see that with everything. You see that with preferences that you think are preferences, but you've just been told they're preferences. I don't know. To me, that's not delusion. To me, delusion equals dysfunction.
Yeah.
Now, when we see what we have now with a lot of Christian nationalism, with a lot of fundamentalism that is extremely harmful and is a deviation and is anti-American, treasonous, and traitorous. To me, those are delusional because they're harming themselves. They're not able to function at their jobs. They're not able to function in their society. They're harming themselves. They're harming their family. Those are delusional beliefs because they stray from the cultural norm and then they harm.
And history is littered with people who have used religion as a pretext for wickedness they wanted to employ, power they wanted to grab. I mean, my experience as a young person was the Troubles in Ireland. I was just across the channel from that. And it came to my town in a horrific incident a couple of times. So, yeah, seeing that happen and knowing that religion didn't specifically cause it, but can be used as an excuse to do evil. It's, that's where it sort of crosses over for me.
Really good questions. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.